Welcome to Have You Seen This? The world's only podcast about obscure, overlooked, and misbegotten visual media. All discussions will be spoiler heavy. You have been warned.
Welcome to Have You Seen This? It's Jen.
And Tim.
And we have a special guest tonight with Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez rekindling their romance.
What?
I said to Tim, there's somebody that we have to have on the show. And Tim was like, of course. And you all know that I am, of course, talking about the man who wrote the screenplay for Gigli, Josh Olson. Josh, welcome back to the show.
I think there's been a miscommunication here.
No, you wrote Gigli and all of the Resident Evil movies.
I'm sitting here going, where the fuck is she going with this?
You and me both.
Who told her that
like
J-Lo and I dated for years? But that was, we kept it very much at the down low because I was kind of embarrassed to be seen with her in public. So.
Oh, right. And then
So
you
I
were the
thought-
one who introduced her to Martin Brest. I get it.
That's right. No, I've had
Speaking of
nothing to do with
breast-
any of those people or that movie. It's a terrible
Of
thing to
course
say.
not.
You shouldn't. By the way, just let me tell you, as I like to think of myself as an experienced podcaster now, wait until the show's over to say terrible things about the guest.
No, I prefer to just roast you while you're here because it's funny and I like doing it.
Fine.
Because otherwise it's just going to be Tim verbally abusing me and, there's got to be a balance. So,
Yeah, I roast Jen roasts the guests. It's the circle of life.
Yeah, it's a vicious circle. It's, we're just acting out the trauma that we experience and, it goes on. But
Oh, hey, speaking of
Joking
Israel,
aside-
sorry,
zing.
bad
Gotcha,
day
Vicky.
for trauma.
Yeah, very bad. But, gosh, how can I segue from that? Josh, you brought us a fun one. A cult classic. Maybe to some people a movie that is misbegotten, but to others a movie which is a lot of fun. And I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about it, and I'm dying to know what Tim thought of it. Do you want to tell us what we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a movie that I first saw, God, I think I saw in bits and pieces as a kid. Not on TV, maybe on VHS. I remember finally seeing it for real during my brief tenure in college at a screening. And I used to, like a lot of people, I used to subscribe to the whole "it's so bad, it's good" notion, which I now reject outright because if a movie's entertaining, it's entertaining. Who gives a shit what the intentions were? But even if I were still buying into that, I've realized as I maybe around the 14th time I saw this film, I realized that this movie is not so bad, it's good. This movie is a flat out fucking masterpiece, and I'm not.
It's like, why split hair?
I'm not bringing the irony here either. We're talking about Russ Meyer and Roger Ebert's masterpiece, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, which is just one of the greatest Gonzo movies ever made, flat out, never been topped.
It is definitely a balls out movie, or maybe I should say a tits out movie.
Yeah, the jokes write themselves with Russ Meyer, that's for sure.
As I understand it, not just one but two breast men, Russ Meyer and Roger Ebert.
Apparently, yeah, but I mean, there's there's Russ Meyer and there's everybody else. There are.
Yeah, Russ Meyer is kind of the breast man to end all breast men.
Yeah, he is the god. I mean, imagine that though. Just imagine that there is a part of anatomy that your name will forever be linked to. That every time anybody who loves movies thinks of boobs, Russ Meyer has to be floating around in their head somewhere.
What does it say about me that I think I share the same taste in women as Russ Meyer?
That you're aces, that you're a top-notch person.
Because,
You got it tight,
goddamn,
yeah.
the broads in this movie,
Yeah.
let me tell you,
Yes,
they are choice.
they are. He had an eye for the ladies, and he had a weird, the thing. And we're going to be talking about this film, and this is a movie. There are absolutely. I don't know, this movie's so over the top that anybody who takes it seriously enough to be offended by it just needs to fuck off. It's it is just this radical slap in the face of everything that was perceived to be sort of, stodgy and decent in America in 1970. And it's so fun. And in his own way, I have to say, in his own métier, if you will, Russ Meyer loved and respected women. And you have to take it in the context of who he was at the time he lived in, because obviously he made lots of movies about, women with gigantic gazongas running around in flimsy outfits or less. But, those women are almost always, especially if you go back to his other films, they're almost always kicking the living shit out of a bunch of just absolutely lunk-headed men, which is, I understand, a very simplistic kind of feminism. But in 1960 softcore porn, that's like, that's pretty serious shit. It was.
There's a direct line from Russ Meyer to Lars von Trier.
Ooh.
Both have a men are trash philosophy.
Oh, well, sure, yeah. I kind of doesn't Lars von Trier think everybody's trash? So I think that.
Yeah, sure, but men in particular. I think Tim and I talked about this on our big Antichrist episode because.
Love that movie.
I mean. Yeah, Tim is not exactly a fan of Von Trier, but has respect for his work, and I have consistently been an apologist for Von Trier. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, he can tend towards being kind of an edgelord some of the time.
Yep, but but he's invested in it. It's not a part-time job with him.
Well, like Von Trier, you can't say that Russ Meyer does things by halves.
Correct.
And
also, I say this as somebody who actually, I think Von Trier is a brilliant filmmaker. There's no question at all. You never are watching a Russ Meyer film and wondering if it's a put on. It's this is a guy, and I remember a friend of mine saying this to me once when I was young, sort of starting out. It was like, if you could just have a career where all you get to do is make movies where you just throw everything you love into them, would there be a better life? And that's what Russ did. Like, none of his films are compromised. None of them are an attempt to pander to somebody else. He made movies for himself.
It's kind of the same idea that we had talking about Ted V. Michaels in our previous episode. Just
That's
like,
exactly
who
I thought of, yeah.
Yeah, what a life. I mean,
Sure.
just, do what you want. Like, create movies that are stuff that you think is cool. And, more power to you.
Yeah, like, I would say that Meyer is a, and with no disrespect to Ted Michaels, I would say that Meyer is maybe like a more skilled and technically apt
No, he was an artist.
filmmaker.
He was also massively successful, which Ted was successful enough to get to keep making movies, but Russ radicalized an entire genre. He made a fortune doing so. I mean, literally the reason he got to do Beyond the Valley of the Dolls is because his low budget softcore porn movies had made so much fucking money. The studios were like, we need to tap into this. I mean, they were a phenomenon.
Yeah, exactly.
And to be clear, to people who've never seen any of this stuff and think they know what we're talking about, it's like, yeah, there are a lot of big boobs in them, but take them out, and there's still this like gonzo bonkers. Right. Hey, this not in all of them.
Woo!
Check out like Faster Pussycat, Kill, no nudity. But even absent that appeal, they're incredibly well shot. He was a photographer beforehand. He was a great photographer. They're incredibly well directed, and he was a radical editor. I've always maintained that if his fetish was knees instead of boobs, he'd get a lot more respect as a filmmaker. Because no Russ Meyer,
if he was a foot
none of
guy
that
like
MTV
Tarantino.
school of filmmaking that came along afterwards, the fast cut. I mean, he just, Michael Bay is like, hanging out down in front of my coffee shop begging for quarters with no Russ Meyer. And I mean, he was an incredibly influential filmmaker. And he got dissed.
Yeah, that was something. Something that I noticed about Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. Like there's a cut on like every line of dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
It's insane.
Yeah, the editing is wild in this movie. Just like every single thing about the rest of it. But maybe it's something.
It doesn't stay on the shot long enough to like bore you with it. It's like on to the next thing, on to the next thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this might be one that we'll have to set up a little bit for
sure.
For younger viewers or people who kind of aren't familiar with that 60s milieu, and I'm actually like really excited to get into it because there's like so much to unpack. And to that end, I was looking at the movie which spawned Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, the original Valley of the Dolls.
Ugh, terrible.
Earlier today. Yeah, it's complete trash.
It's not, yeah.
But
And as they say at the
Um,
beginning of Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, this movie has no, although it started as
yeah,
a sequel.
but in a way, that movie really informed the making of Beyond the Valley of the Dolls because it's so indicative of how just sclerotic the film industry had become in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And, when people think about like classic films, like, films from uh, the 70s and before, like there's a tendency to think of, just like you do with any like, historical thing, is like you think like, oh, things were better in the good old days. But Hollywood has been turning out crap since like the beginning of filmmaking. And if you kind of look through a lot of the studio product from the 60s, there's a reason that the second golden age of Hollywood, the new Hollywood, had to happen in the 70s because the movies were bloated trash,
Yep.
just complete lumbering, just complete garbage. And the original Valley of the Dolls, while it has like some camp value, I have to say, like, I was laughing my ass off at the scene where Patty Duke tears the wig off Susan Hayward's head and flushes it down the toilet. Just looking at these movies, you think like, God, like they're just selling like garbage to idiots.
Yeah, I wouldn't go, but yeah, they were flailing.
Does that work?
They were flailing. Yeah, it's. I don't know, have you seen a movie these days? The yeah, they were definitely flailing, and there was this whole sort of youth explosion going on that they were trying to capitalize on and couldn't figure out that people like Roger Corman were all over.
Mm-hmm.
Corman of course made all those biker films, and he makes The Trip, which immediately leads into, which is a movie, by the way, I never know who knows what. It's a Bruce Dern and Jack Nicholson and Peter Fonda movie about a guy who does acid. That's literally it. And the movie was such a smash hit, it paved the way for what came after, which was Easy Rider. And that Easy Rider just blew these people's minds. It was like, here's a movie by these hairball drug addicts that made more money than, Dr. Doolittle and Cleopatra combined. What are we going to do? And the nice thing is, because what you've got now is you've got everything is so, they have apps to figure out how a movie's going to do and what's going to sell and all the rest of this. They didn't then. They were just like, fuck, I don't know. Maybe they know something we don't. And they just sort of opened the door for a few years to these maniacs. And most of them were younger. I mean, the fact that an old fart, Russ Meyer was a World War II veteran. The fact that he managed to climb in and make a movie that I would argue is more radical than most of the movies that those hairballs were making, is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's him as a practice filmmaker rather than just being like a hot spark or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
Yeah, and the very interesting thing about Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, which came out in 1970, right on the cusp of that new Hollywood. It's kind of amazing that it was made with studio money.
Unreal.
Because it is not in any way a studio picture. And it was interesting to, I didn't really watch the whole thing. I scrubbed through it on YouTube. But, looking at Valley of the Dolls.
Oh, God. I thought, sorry. I thought you were, okay. God, I was having a heart attack. You didn't watch all of Beyond the Valley of the Dolls?
No. I watched every nipple Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. But kind of scrubbing through Valley of the Dolls, it's amazing how kind of stodgy and hidebound it seems. It came out in 1967, like the Summer of Love, when there were all these radical upheavals in the culture, and the kids were marching in the street and blowing their minds on drugs and stuff like that. And then you look at a movie like Valley of the Dolls, which does deal with drugs, but it's about people.
They will destroy you.
Yeah, like people taking pills to get through their day. It's like a very Mother's Little Helper kind of thing, and it's sordid, but it's not. It's so disconnected from like the youth culture of the time because it's it's just these like studio hacks being like, okay, well we bought this novel which sold like several million copies, and we're just gonna kind of vomit it out on the screen, and it did make money, but it's not like it's not the thing that people remember the way that they remember Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, because like the Meyer and Ebert's film was just such a radical statement, and Valley of the Dolls is just like like as you like you can imagine like the executives at the studio just like being completely confounded by the youth culture at the time. And I think that's hard for people to realize now, like how much of a generation gap there truly was. Like it was just like a yawning chasm.
It would be like if you released TikTok the movie.
Yeah. But no, it's true. That thing has been blurred. I mean, obviously there are still distinct, barriers between generations.
Of course.
But, for most of my adult life, grown-ups have clung to youth in a way that they didn't back in the 60s and 70s. It's like the studios are full of people who are older than me who are, who have TikTok accounts and, are just trying to keep up. And they do Instagram and they're listening to all the music that all the kids are into. And they're but back then that was an alien concept. It was like these kids will grow out of it. They'll turn into me. They'll start drinking bourbon and then they'll like my movies.
Like the young people.
Yeah, it's not me who's wrong. It's the children.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the young people were really seen as a threat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that hasn't carried through till today. I mean, it's like you just look at how like the consistent conservative moral panic is about, what those damn kids are doing on those damn Bolshevik college campuses.
Right.
But, especially like at the time of Valley of the Dolls and its quote unquote sequel, like, they were really asking themselves, like, what has happened to the youth of America? Like, we don't even recognize these people.
Yeah.
And, I feel like Ebert and Meyer kind of gave the studio, like, a taste of the youth culture, but they sure as fuck didn't understand it. I mean, the suits,
Yeah.
They were like, what the hell did you give us?
Yeah, and I think because Ebert, knew his way around a bit of, this scene a little bit. Because it's also... One of the things I love about this film, it's part of a small cadre of movies. I mean, there's a Austin Powers quotes it directly. There's even a scene in, I think, the second one where he goes, "It's my happening and it freaks me out." And I'm sitting there in the theater going, hey, this movie's pretty fun. And then he says that, and I'm just like, yes, I found my tribe. But Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, The President's Analyst is another. There's one or two others that transcribe a 60s that never really existed but should have. That's just like Technicolor and just bonkers and beautiful and a lot of bright colors and
a distilled sort of ideal of what people were presenting.
Yeah, and I think while the studios were saying, we need to capture what's going on with these kids and show it to them, and Ebert and Meyer are going, fuck that, let's show them what they want to see. Let's show them the world they want to live in, which is, I mean, just...
Yeah, a guy who talks in like Shakespearean prose constantly.
Yes.
Oh
yes.
my God.
Yea, I vow it, ere this night does wane, you will drink the black sperm of my vengeance. Please tell your listeners I'm not reading off anything. I can do that all night.
I believe it. No, God, Z-Man has real theater kid energy, doesn't he? I really wanted to punch the guy for that reason, but actually, I'm told
he's got a good look.
I'm told that he was based on Phil Spector.
Well, yeah, there's a little bit of like
right
he's
mouth.
the teen prince of pop, so that's sort of implied in the thing. Although he's
Well, like the guy waving a gun around at a party.
Yeah, I mean, amazingly, yeah, and then he does sort of predict Phil Spector down the line, doesn't he?
And I absolutely wanted to bring that up because...
Oh my God, you know what? This is the thing when you live with a movie so long, it's never occurred, but you're right. He is clearly inspired by Phil Spector, and he starts murdering his own guests decades before Phil Spector did, as far as we know. And now I've ruined the ending of the film. I'm sorry, but believe me, there's no way to ruin this film. Can we promise not to talk about the big revelation, though, or is that?
No, this is the spoiler heavy podcast. Our listeners are big boys and girls and NBs. Like if they don't want to be spoiled, then they can like look at the fucking title of the episode and be like, hey, maybe I'll wait to listen to this until after I've seen the movie.
Or do so
I would
now.
please do that. We had a friend. I showed it a couple of weeks ago to a bunch of friends, and one of my friends had to leave about 2/3 of the way through because she was having a really bad migraine. And so much respect for she feels it coming on. She's like, I need to leave. And she takes off. Her boyfriend stays. Everything's fine. I was like, that's very mature. And she ended up watching the movie the next day. And I think it blew her mind because when she left, she was an hour and 10 minutes into the film, and as crazy as it is, she's like, okay, I sort of know what this is. I sort of know what's going. And then you watch the end of the film, and you're like, what the fuck? You cannot. There's so many movies. I don't want to ruin the next James Bond movie, but come on, he wins. We know this. There's so many movies you see where you're kind of like, there's going to be some surprises, but it's going to work out, or where it's going to go. You cannot call the ending of They even show you the end of Beyond the Valley of Dolls in the first minute, and you still can't tell where it's going to go.
No, that's true. Like, it was something that my friend Blake always said is that, because he was so good at predicting where a movie would go. And in my 20s, this used to astound me, but he told me, he was like, look, and this was a guy who saw like several movies a week, every week. And he's like, look, you see enough of these movies, like you start to be able to,
you kind of know where
you
it's
start
going,
to learn all the tricks, you know. And as I got older, I was like, oh, like he was right. It's like as you get familiar with the medium, like, you start to see what things like, if you'll forgive me for saying so, Josh, what tricks and tropes screenwriters lean on.
Yep.
To find a movie that, can really surprise you is delightful.
Yeah.
Yeah, for better or worse, it's like a lot of the time they'll just sort of casually toss something off in the beginning of the movie, and you're like, that's going to come around later and be.
Well, to be fair, I should lay the reason, one of the reasons the ending of Beyond the Valley of Dolls works is that they just pull it out of their ass at the last minute. There's no setting up the revelations at the end. It's just like completely out of left field. But nonetheless.
Oh, by the way, no. And that seems a lot of the like appeal of this counterculture or exploitation movie is that it does like take you well into the weeds. It goes off the rails, but then it just like it allows you to indulge these like really outsider notions and then pulls it back onto the straight and narrow.
Yeah. Which, by the way, Beyond the Valley of Dolls does, but in such a depraved and hilarious way, with that incredible epilogue at the end where, the crippled guy starts walking again and everybody gets married and you're playing the sappy soap opera music and it's like, the guy lecturing you at the end about, all you need is love. It's such an over-the-top version of that it ends up completely undermining it at the same time, which I love.
Right.
Yeah, but going back to Phil Spector, this, like, I won't say that it was a happening that freaked me out, but it did give me pause to see Z-Man push a gun into the mouth of a woman in pretty much the same way Phil Spector did it to Lana Clarkson. I mean, Lana she wasn't sleeping at the time. She was trying to leave his fucking house, but it's pretty much the same thing. And yes,
life imitates art.
And yeah, like Z-Man was sort of nominally based on Phil Spector. Like Meyer and Ebert admitted that they had never met the guy, but they had heard stories about him because Phil Spector was the kind of guy that you heard stories about.
Yeah.
And people who did know Spector said, like, you pretty much captured his essence with that character.
that I didn't know, but that makes sense.
Yeah, no. So
I know the actor. The sad thing, I believe John Lazar, the actor, was very for years was miffed with Meyer, and did he try? I don't want to say he sued him and be wrong, but there was at least talk of a lawsuit because he felt that Meyer had destroyed his career. Which
really,
yeah, and I can see his point because he didn't get a lot of kind of quote unquote straight work in sort of mainstream films, but good God. You come to the end of your life, you look back and you're like, I was fucking Z-Man. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, that role immortalized him in a way because it's such an indelible role and performance that it's like, well, if you got to be defined by something, like, it might as well be that. But,
you don't see Jay Davies in a lot of movies either.
But I think when it's happening, it's not, it's a little tougher. You get,
Well, yeah, like, I think you need, like, time and distance.
Yes.
But, I don't know, have we set up Beyond the Valley of Dolls for our listeners? I mentioned...
It's because I don't want anyone listening to this without having seen it already. I'm going to be so upset if somebody...
Now you all heard the man. Like if you're indulging in spoilers before the appropriate time, you're going to upset Josh very much. So we don't usually, but we recommend that you check out the movie before you listen to this.
Do,
so, but to that end, the movie is nominally a sequel to the movie based on. I know who you meant, Tim. The movie is nominally a sequel to.
Nope.
Well,
they open with it. No, I have to, because if one person hears that, it goes, now I have to see Valiant. No. It opens with a disclaimer.
No.
Yeah, will I not know what's going on?
Yeah, no. Trust me. Don't see Valley of the Dolls. Don't listen to this woman.
No,
She's deranged.
I'm getting to that.
She's doing you harm. This is a bad podcast. You need to be stopped.
Okay.
This is what you get for saying I wrote Gigli. I'm like, gloves off, man. We're doing it.
Wow, you weren't as upset when I said that you wrote all the Resident Evil movies, but
a successful franchise, Jen. Come on. Right.
As I was saying, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls is really a sequel in name only to the movie based on Jacqueline Suzanne's Valley of the Dolls. Just to give you guys the short version, Valley of the Dolls was a incredibly best-selling novel at the time. It's a trashy book that they made a trashy movie out of, and because it was successful, 20th Century Fox said, let's make a sequel to it. Now, there was some kind of...
Did they put it a specific way, Jen?
You might be getting a little ahead of me, but actually, get ahead of me, please. Say what you were going to say.
No, I'm just trying to shoehorn a tortured Mystery Science Theater joke into this.
Oh, well, then put a buck in the swear jar.
All right, go on.
There was some kind of a snafu with the creation of Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, where I believe Jacqueline Suzanne herself had actually written a script for it, but the studio rejected it.
Right.
And maybe Josh can tell us how the screenplay for what we got came about.
Yeah, I don't remember. I used to be much more intimately familiar with all those details. I don't remember how it came about that they didn't end up making an actual sequel. But and I don't remember. This is terrible. I'm a terrible guest. I can't remember how Meyer and Ebert got to know each other. I think Ebert had written some complimentary reviews of Meyer's earlier work. And by the way, if you haven't seen Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, you have to. I also have a very soft spot for. He did a movie called Mudhoney, which is sort of his attempt at a kind of Faulknerian melodrama, which is just amazing. A lot of other films.
Any opinion on Super Vixens?
I love Super Vixens. I actually saw, when I was a kid, I saw Super Vixens in the same movie theater that David Naughton turns into a werewolf in at the end of American Werewolf in London. And every time I see that movie, I have fond thoughts of seeing It was Super Vixen and Black Snake, which is Russ Meyer's one unwatchable movie. No, that's not true. 7 Minutes is also terrible. But
yes, 7 Minutes, which followed the success of Beyond the Valley.
That was his next studio film, and it's a trial movie, and it's so fucking boring. You can't believe the same filmmaker made it.
Yeah, and in spite of the success of Beyond the Valley of the
7 minutes,
Dolls,
but it feels much longer.
It is not 7 minutes in heaven. In spite of the success of Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, the studio was kind of upset with what they ended up with, I think.
Oh, yeah.
So Russ Meyer's career as a studio filmmaker was not a long one.
It's not for him.
Well, it wasn't really a hit either, was it? Or it did okay. It was not a great success.
I mean, it's a counterculture cult movie. I wouldn't consider that a...
Yeah.
Well, I think that going off the box office returns, it made more than its money back.
Oh, did it? Okay.
But I don't think people would say... I don't think you could say that, in the parlance of the time, that people really grokked it.
Yes. Oh, good one there. Good one there.
It was definitely one of the movies made for Have You Seen This? Because
right.
People didn't really dig it at the time. But its reputation grew as the years went on. But how do we want to? Do we want to even try to describe the plot of Valley of the Dolls?
You can.
I mean, it is kind of a funhouse mirror inversion of the plot of Valley of the Dolls, in which it's young women entering a creative industry and finding delights in depravity. But while while Valley of the Dolls is kind of just a soapy
It's
treatment.
Girl in Gold Boots.
Yeah. Yeah, like Girl in Gold Boots made by, as we said, like
Right,
being a better filmmaker than Ted Michaels.
He also ran, yeah.
Yeah, it's really just kind of like a phantasmagoria of the counterculture, but there's this satirical thread running through it, kind of provided by Ebert's script, which makes it really stand out from a lot of the, kind of the lurid trash of the time.
Yeah, and
do you
let's
think
be.
That's accurate, Josh?
Yeah, I think so. And I apologize. I really am. That's terrible. I used to know all this stuff. I just it was a hit. It was a hit. Ebert is such a good writer. It's I hate to speak ill of. I mean, I thought he was an all right film critic in print. The TV show he did, especially in the early years, was incredibly important in terms of they used to spotlight a lot of smaller independent filmmakers. I know, like Wayne Wang, John Sayles. These are all people whose careers were massively helped by these guys going on TV and hyping their first movies. And there's nothing. I mean, he was obviously a lovely person. And I gotta say, shortly before he died, he tweeted out my article. I will not read your fucking script. So he'll always be a good guy in my book. But and he liked my movie. But when I think of Ebert, Gigli, that's right. He was a huge fan of Gigli, and
everybody was. People loved that movie. Don't ever come
to the 323, my friend. This script is so fucking good. It is so literate and so funny and so smart and so just in love with language, in love with movies, in love with boobs. I mean, just everything. It's everything. It's great. And I'm going to digress a moment. There's a book that Joan Didion wrote with John Gregory Dunn called Monster, which was about their experience writing. I can't remember the name of it. They wrote this shitty movie about Jessica Savage, the newswoman, and it got destroyed and turned into a terrible film. And they wrote a book about their experience in Hollywood doing that. They'd written a ton of screenplays, and it's a fine book. It's sort of it's a very anodyne kind of breakdown of how a movie goes wrong. But there's a moment in the book where they're in Hollywood and they're going to an Oscar party at Wolfgang Puck's. It's like Wolfgang Puck's private Oscar party. And they're very excited to be there. They look around everywhere they look. It's like A-list filmmakers and great writers and great directors. And then they see Ebert and they're both just outraged. Like, what's that guy doing here? And I remember, I've literally only done this once in my life. I've actually thrown a book across the room. If Joan Didion and John Gregory Dunn in their entire filmic career had written one scene as good as anything in Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. But it's like, fuck them. He's so far beyond them, so above them, so much better than them. And here are these fucking snobs whose entire filmography is all just kind of, it's fine. Like their best movie is fine. They're not, oh, how dare they. But Ebert, that one script, motherfucker, it's great. It's just great.
And
yeah, like you said about language, like just that sort of Green Acres-esque montage of the argument to and for and against LA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the slam poetry, like set to kind of like a rock beat with like the quick cutting and the,
edited accordingly.
Yeah, and I found myself looking for the landmarks like as it went on.
Yes.
And we have talked on the show about both Ebert and his longtime TV partner and friend Gene Siskel, and these were not stupid guys, and they both had a really all-encompassing love of film that really shone through. But they had the occasional whack take. I mean, for example, like neither one of them really understood the slasher movie when it was a thing.
Yeah.
They just really didn't get like what that genre is about. They kind of like took the like outraged moral stance about it. And while I've seen obviously like so much of Ebert's criticism that I was like, no, yeah, that's like a fair assessment. Like, occasionally you'll read something from him where you go like, come on. But
dude, yeah, your biggest film credit, you open with a woman having a gun stuck in her mouth, being forced to fillet it, then getting shot as blood explodes out of her nose. There's certain things you don't get to complain about. You just don't.
That's a really good point. It is an arresting way to open one's movie.
Yes.
And yeah, like I just can't get over like the parallel to Phil Spector.
I know it's insane that I've never thought about that, but you're of course completely right.
But I think that in spite of his occasional bad takes on movies, like I would say that this movie like really assures like Ebert's kind of reputation as like a really clever writer, because there's so much going on in this movie, which is like, and I don't want to say like winking because that implies like a kind of ironic detachment, but just kind of like the satirical elements are like what really distinguish it.
Mm-hmm.
But how, again, like we still haven't really explained like what this movie is or what it's about. Like, I don't know, Tim, do you want to take a crack at it?
The mamas and the papas come to LA.
No.
And no? All right. Let's see.
There's no men in the group, first of all.
Right. Okay,
and there's nobody in the movie as depraved as John Phillips, for one thing.
Good point.
There's that.
I mean, say what you want about
Josie and the Pussycats?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
It's an X-rated Josie and the Pussycats.
Good.
Magical fantasy land of Hollywood in 1970.
There you go.
And really 1969, because it really is, as much as it's 1970, it's a movie about the 60s.
Yeah, and it really is kind of like that mythic 60s that people like to talk about, like the, oh man, if you remember it, you weren't really there kind of thing.
Right.
I don't know.
LA for people who aren't from LA.
Yeah, I don't know if people still say that, but Josh, you've probably seen it the most times.
Probably. Yeah, I think.
If you were to try to describe I don't want to say the plot. Let's call it the log line. The one.
Yeah, it really is. It is an X-rated Josie and the Pussycats. It's about a girl group that comes to LA to make it big, and then does and sees the dark and seamy side of it all, and has to make each one of them has to decide. Just like each of you will have to decide who you will be. They have to decide what they care about and where they stand in the world and who they love and what matters to them. And some live and some die, and some find happiness and some get punished for, being lesbians. There's still some creepy stuff there. But God damn it,
But ultimately, it's about friendship.
That's exactly right.
Even though I feel like, because it gets some heat from people now. It certainly didn't then for that aspect of it, because the two lesbians in it do die. In 1969, 1970, you couldn't possibly make a film, especially for a studio in which they didn't, or in which they weren't punished in some way. And up until that point, at least, it's actually a pretty interesting, complicated adult relationship that those two women have,
Now, as a side note,
yes,
that's a very funny thing, because if we're going to take this kind of like celluloid closet like approach to looking at the movie and its treatment of queerness, I saw somebody tweeted the other day a screen cap of the TV Tropes entry about the film Milk with Sean Penn, which, as we all know, is about Harvey Milk, the mayor of San Francisco. And on TV Tropes, they were like, this is an example of the bury your gays trope, because Harvey Milk is murdered at the end of the movie. And I was just like, oh my God, this is a website for morons!
They changed the ending, yeah.
Yeah, that was my problem with the film. I got to be honest. I don't know if I've been at this longer than you. I'm probably more enlightened. I thought the film was great, but I thought when they killed him, it was just like, come on, please, really?
Yeah,
we have to punish him.
They could have, and no sequel either.
Yeah,
so
yeah, like they could have. There's
really short-sighted.
Yeah, they're so afraid to make a sequel about a strong gay man that or a series that they killed him at the end of the first one. It's bullshit.
Yeah,
come on,
really
Jen, you can do better. Shame on you.
What they really should have done was when Dan White came into the office with a gun, like he and Harvey Milk should have realized that they were actually in love with each other.
Sure.
And Dan would have dropped the gun, and they would have run off together.
That would have been much better.
Got gay married.
Well,
and that
then you would have just had American Beauty
for young queer people. I don't know why they didn't go that way, but yeah, like there is obviously there's this movie has lesbians in it. I mean, but like an actual like treatment of a lesbian relationship. Like it's got I mean it's but that's the thing.
There's a black love triangle.
By the way, there's not just a black love triangle. There are an African American couple. My God, not just an African American couple. The woman gets to have sex several times with different guys. Black sexuality in movies, especially in studio films, just non-existent. I mean, the fact that they get to have sex and they actually get to make it all the way through the film without being punished is fucking amazing.
It was like a black Bechdel test almost.
Yeah, because the like one of the girls, Pet, she has a relationship with a handsome young law student, and ends up in a triangle with
Muhammad
a
Ali,
dangerous young fighter.
Muhammad Ali,
yeah,
basically. So it's one of my favorite lines. Hey, my man, what is it? Since the last time I saw you, you became heavyweight champion of the world. And everywhere he goes, he wears no shirt and has a towel over his shoulders.
Oh yeah, that's true, huh?
Because he's a champ.
Yeah, it's sort of like the way he's presented. Yeah, because it's like, how is she going to say no to him?
Yeah, come on.
How does anyone come to? Yeah.
And I love that. And by the way, that's Meyer. That is Meyer. Like he's like, yeah, good for her.
Yeah, we have. I mean, we beyond like lesbian sexuality and like kind of like fully realized like black characters like throughout the movie, like we have women like openly showing like sexual desire and having sex, and like not all of them get killed for.
Well, no, and look at all the women get to fuck whoever they want to fuck in a sort of in the best way possible, and the few men who actually engage in sexual congress with more than one woman are they're all fucked up. It's like her boyfriend's off doing it with Edie Adams, but he's just like off in this drunken, drug addicted haze of self-loathing and hatred. And it's and then what's her name? The other guy who's the gigolo is just an absolute pig. But the women are like, they're free. They get to do this stuff and they don't get punished. Again, except for the lesbian, and it's the era, and I understand that. But come on.
Yeah, and all the people that seem like in high status that you mean at the beginning are just shown to be like these just really like desperate, broken people by the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Which it's a cautionary tale. I don't know if they lay it on thick at the very end, but it came across that way to me.
Well, except for her aunt, who does get to marry the love of her life, Charles Napier.
Right, yeah, that's true. And it's great seeing him in
Yes.
this.
Young Charles Napier.
Yeah, in so many Meyer loved him. They were just he's great in Super Vixens too.
Yeah, just like the opening scene of that. It's like him like beating like a woman and then electrocuting her in a bathtub.
Right.
It's like, yeah, this is how you start your movie. Sure.
Yeah, because he's in bed with a huge-breasted, stunning 24-year-old nymphette who wants to perform fellatio on him, and he doesn't go for that because it's queer stuff, as he says.
That character is just like, you got problems, man.
He's a very troubled individual.
Speaking of queer themes, there's also a and this is something that was also in the movie Valley of the Dolls. I can't speak for the book because why would I read it? But Beyond the Valley of the Dolls does have a scene with someone's manhood being questioned. And it was really funny, like, because I texted Tim, like, before we were recording, because I was, like I said, I was just kind of scrubbing through the original Valley of the Dolls.
Right.
And as I scrubbed, I stopped, and I landed right on a part where Patty Duke was calling a guy a fag.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, whoa, 1967, I'll be damned.
Madam, you've cut me to the quick.
Yeah. With your rapier wits. But yeah, there's like a similar scene in Beyond the Valley of the Dolls where
Edie Williams. What you need
yes.
is a nice young boy. Yeah.
she's a pistol, isn't she?
Yes. She was Meyer's wife too.
Yes. It
smiles with all of her teeth.
Yes.
Every last one of them. Yeah.
She's she's really something. And this is something I didn't realize about Edie Williams, is that like, she was married to Russ Meyer for a while, and like, I don't know how her career went after that. I just know that she, for years after that, like up until like, oh my god, like, I just realized, until like at least 1999, she had a penchant for showing up to the Academy Awards wearing very little.
And Cannes too, right? Wasn't she at the Cannes Festival all the time?
Yeah, and I sent a link to Tim where it was just like various like news agency photos of her just with one titty out. Like, this is not a woman who's good at wearing clothes.
Show your best side.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, like, she's but her role basically in Beyond the Valley of the Dolls is to be, she's like an adult film star. She immediately latches on to Harris, the young guy who's having a relationship with what's her name? Is the singer of the band.
It was kind of supplanted immediately by Z-Man.
Yeah, he's such a. I also want to say that Edie Williams also shows up as one of. Oh God, what's the character? One of the few characters they made up for the show, but on the old Batman '66, Liberace played a villain, and Edie Williams played his Maul, essentially. But yeah, Harris is that poor guy. He's such a drip, and he's also, it's like, you really do need to be symmetrical to be in movies. These are the things you notice like the 43rd time. There's scenes when they're playing a song. And there's this rivalry going on between Z-Man and Harris, who is dating the lead singer in the band. And she's starting to drift towards Dr.
Great.
Z. And they're playing, and their faces, Z-Man is superimposed on one side and Harris is on the other. And then they flop them. And it's obviously the same shot, but they have flopped Harris. And you realize he's very asymmetrical, because he looks just, when they reverse the way his face looks, he's just the dumbest looking guy you've ever seen.
And he is playing like kind of like the the gormless young guy.
Bit of a hayseed.
He's the ingenue. He's the only ingenue in the thing. Everybody else knows what they're doing. Poor Harris is just a.
Yeah, because his girlfriend, who, like, I just refreshed my memory, Kelly McNamara, played by the very cute Dolly Reed.
Very British.
And like, she really knows, like, what's what. Like, she just dives into this Hollywood scene like full tilt. Gets like a new guy, like her career takes off, and Harris is really floundering, like, and to the point where, like, Edie Williams is coming on to him, and like, I mean, like, the only way
said the spider to the fly.
Yeah, like, the only way she could be more obvious would be if she just said to him, like, I want to fuck you. But
she
he's just
does.
like,
she goes, you're an interesting boy. I'd love to strap you on. I don't know if you can get much more explicit than that. That's the first time they meet. So,
and that would go over my head. But...
Tim, have you ever had that experience?
Yes.
Incredibly sexy women have said, I'd like to strap you on. Those words?
More or less.
Okay.
Yeah, not those words exactly, but yes.
It's got to be those words. It doesn't count if it's not those words.
Oh, okay, never mind. I guess there's way more subtle than that.
But I know, like very attractive women have, like, just, like, laid their tits upon you and been like, hey, how about it? And you're like,
I'm just like, well, Yeah, let me finish what I'm
Meanwhile,
doing.
yeah, that's A. B, you're like 24. C, your girlfriend, who's a rock singer, is off in the bedroom with Phil Spector. I think it's okay. I think it's all right.
Might be allowed.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so poor Harris really suffers while the Carrie Nation's career takes off.
Yes.
Yeah, because so much of it is just like, get in while the getting's good, or just like kind of decline into obscurity, and that's what Harris is set up for.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's he just isn't like he just doesn't vibe with it, man. He's just not.
And he's such a selfish asshole. Finally, in the end, because he they're doing a TV show, right? They're having their hits. They go on a TV show, and they decide to they're like, hey, let's not do a song off the album. Let's do one of our old classics for Harris, who we all miss. What they don't realize is that Harris is up in the rafters, and while they're performing on fucking TV, on basically the Carson show, what does he do? He jumps off the rafters and tries to kill himself. Like, what a fucking dick. I'm sorry. Although I love, did you catch, and if you didn't, go back and watch it again, the sound effect when he drops? It's the sound of an...
I caught that, yeah.
It's the sound of an airplane crashing. It's amazing.
Yeah, and you get the snap at the end, too. Yeah. And it's great the host is just like, keep those cameras rolling.
Yeah. Keep the cameras rolling. Yes.
Yeah, like, can you imagine if that guy had been at our Bud Dwyer's press conference?
Keep rolling, yeah.
But I'm just, every time I see it, I'm just like, Harris is a dick. It's like the biggest mistake Kelly made is to get involved with that dipshit.
Well, yeah, because the Lance Rock, kind of like the gigolo type, like good-looking blonde guy, but he's transparently after her money because she's about to come into an inheritance from her aunt. Or her aunt wants to get her, like, her mother, like, a share of her mother's inheritance or something like that. But, it almost doesn't matter. The movie's so crazy.
By the way, played by Michael Blodgett, who went on to be a screenwriter and wrote Turner and Hooch.
So, Jen, you would be a fan.
I saw that. I'm not joking when, because I was probably about 10 when that movie came out. I saw it at least 4 times in the theater. As well as K-9 starring James Belushi.
Yeah, sort of the also
ran. Knockoff. Yeah, well, that's Lance Rock sitting behind a keyboard knocking that out. So.
Honestly, good for him.
Yep.
I don't remember anything about Turner and Hooch. It's just that there's a big slobbery dog in it and Tom Hanks. But, I hope he got his bag off that. He's very good in this as kind of the...
He's so vile, isn't he? He's so, like, everything about him. He's got unctuous eyelids. It's just, he's incredible. He's incredible.
Yeah, he's good looking, but everything about him just screams fuck boy. I mean, they didn't have the expression back then, but yeah, he's a fuck boy.
Well, he's literally
which we we get a glimpse of that later. Like it's him with like some old maid.
Not again, lady. Yeah.
He's fucking some old bitch because probably because she has money.
Right. Yeah.
Probably you need to watch the film again. I think you may have missed it. The essential truth of the character. It's only because she's got money.
No, I think I think he likes mature women. There's some guys who are like that, and we shouldn't judge.
But yeah, that gets back to like all these successful, albeit broken characters, where it's like there's this desperate drive to remain relevant.
Yeah.
And like everyone's like stepping on everyone else just to like stay ahead, and so that's why he's compromised in that he's like sleeping with rich women for their money or whatever, just to like stay in the limelight. Yeah. It's sort of this tragic character that is isn't successful in their own regard, but only by what they're grasping for. Like, they only get that because they're so grasping.
Yeah, and there are so many kind of funny, wild characters in this movie who are as venal. We haven't talked about.
Thank you.
We haven't talked about Porter Hall.
Oh, Porter Hall.
Who is immediately like very jealous of Kelly because he sees her as essentially someone who is just out to enrich herself, but he probably wants to keep that gravy train for himself, so to that end he kind of goes toe to toe with Kelly, who bests him pretty easily. I would say. Yeah. He's really not equipped to deal with Kelly at all.
Oh, she demolishes him with her marijuana and her sexuality.
Yeah, they're like tete-a-tete is kind of takes place in their respective domains, you know. He like tries to get her drunk, you know, in like his domain,
Yeah.
but then it's like, why don't we go back to my place and I'll get you high?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, now you're on my turf.
Yeah, and he just, oh man, he just cannot cope with this little Spitfire. she's she's very attractive.
Also, you seen them titties?
Oh my god. Honestly, like literally like all the women in this movie are absolute dimes. Oh my god. Like there's almost like I was almost overwhelmed because like they're all just so they're all so gorgeous. Like every last one of them, except maybe like the old bitch that Lance Rock is fucking, but you know, I'm sure she has a good personality.
Yeah, Cynthia Myers was, I think,
They're
just
honkers.
my dream girl when I was about 13. So
Casey,
the drummer, yes,
Ugh.
comes to a sad,
She
tragic end because she never met a man like me, so she goes to women.
She is so
Rough, yeah.
hot.
She
Like
just
my god.
those eyes, oh my god.
And then like you know, before her tragic ending, she spends she spends the bookends of the movie just running around in like a lace like get up that
Yes.
whew, man, and you know,
And
Russ
getting an
Meyer-
abortion. Getting an abortion. Don't forget.
Yeah. I love that scream and cut that
Yeah.
they have.
To the
where,
eggs
you
being
know,
fried, yeah.
She just flips out in the abortionist office. But yeah, like my man, like Russ Meyer knew how to photograph the female form.
Oh God, did he? Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Tim, what did you think of the dames in this movie?
Like you say, straight dimes. You know, Russ has a type.
Yeah, he does it that. What did you think of Dolly Reed, Kelly?
She's cute.
Wow.
She's great.
Very
It drives me
attached.
crazy that especially Meyer, who was so great at finding these people, her inability to do an American accent just makes me crazy. She's always like, you know, I want $1 million, man. You're not from
That
the
was funny
Midwest.
because-
What are you?
Yeah, I noticed that, and I was like, huh. Like, I assume this actress is British because, like, the Britishness is coming out. It's like the famous, like, Christian Bale freak out on the set of Terminator Salvation. And if you listen to it, you hear him, like, go in and out of, like, John Connor's American accent to his own. Like, there are flashes of the British, but then he goes back to, like, American.
Right.
It's very weird.
Well, that's a
Like,
performance. I mean, I should, as somebody is.
He's a hard man, eh?
No, I look. I mean, it's everywhere give him shit for that, and there's a million reasons to give actors shit. But an AD who keeps interfering with your shot, it's like that shouldn't happen once. It's completely fucking insane because it's bad for other performers. This guy kept doing it, and I know I'm gonna get killed for this, but at a certain point, you're like, this can't happen. This is this extreme level of unprofessionalism, and my sense of that is that was a performance. And he was like, all right, I'm just going to go full on mental on this guy. And if that doesn't fucking do it, I don't know what will.
You and me, we're done professionally.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great
And
performance.
you know what?
It's a way to get your point across.
Yeah.
And he just wanted to be able to make eye contact with Bryce Dallas Howard without interference.
I could see
that's a
wanting
big
to do
deal.
that.
That's a big deal. Look, I'm happy to bag on these guys. I had somebody, it's like Tom Cruise won't make eye contact with the crew before he goes on set. You're like, yeah, he's got to get into a place to do his thing. I'm not a Tom Cruise fan, but that's part of the job. It's a weird fucking job, man.
No, yeah, that's something that we had talked about before. Yeah, it is a strange job.
It's a strange job. Yeah, I need not to look at it.
It is a very strange job.
I'm fairly sympathetic to it.
But getting back to the topic at hand, Josh, like what I've kind of alluded to it in my kind of the way I've talked around it on the show so far, but there really is something about this movie that sets it apart from other kind of like psychedelic cash grabs at the time. So maybe you can tell our audience like what the real appeal of this movie is, because it definitely has something more going on under the surface than just like, hey, it's like tits and drugs and sex and crazy shit, and then there's a murder at the end.
Wait, that's not appealing? Like, what more do you want?
I'll tell you, because most of the movies that we're trying to do what this film did are doing it from the outside in, and by people who are trying very hard to pass off as coming from the inside out, if that makes sense. And Meyer and Ebert don't give a fuck. They are having a blast. They know enough about this culture that they can do this kind of insane cartoon version of it, but they know they're not part of it, but they enjoy the fuck out of it. They enjoy kids. They enjoy the youth culture. They enjoy the energy of it. And they have nothing but love for it, and they are making the movie they want to make. There's nothing in this that is like, okay, how do we pander to this audience? Because they're not doing that. And I think that's the film's fundamental appeal, is that this is not an attempt to talk down to you, to lure you into something. This is like, motherfucker, this is our vision, and you're either with us, you're on the bus or you're off the bus. And that alone, is a huge appeal, especially at a time when that was actually a mantra. It was like, you're on the bus or you're off the bus. And I think people can recognize that it's a weird thing to say about this movie. It's sincere.
Yeah, it's presenting a certain strength of convictions. Yeah, like you say, it's we're making the movie that we want to make, and it's great that it resonates with people. But if it doesn't, fuck them.
Fuck them. Which is why you know about the Sex. Do you know about the Sex Pistols connection? I mean, do you guys? Because the Sex Pistols.
I do not.
Sex Pistols love this movie. One of the things, I only found this out a couple of years ago. I mean, I knew the story. I didn't know about this one line. The Sex Pistols, when at their peak, there was going to be a movie, and there is finally a movie, The Great Rock and Roll Swindle, which is a collage of some of the various and sundry failed attempts to make a Sex Pistols movie. And there's even some footage from the Meyer version. But they got Russ Meyer and Roger Ebert on board to write it, and Roger Ebert wrote a script for the Sex Pistols movie that, some of it got made. And I know there were issues, because I think it's one thing for Johnny Rotten to be watching this movie and loving its anarchic spirit, and then all of a sudden he's sitting in a room with this World War II vet who's into bourbon and broads, and they just did not get along. But the famous line from the Sex Pistols from their last concert at Winterland, when they broke up, they came out, they played a shitty 20-minute set, and you've seen the footage. Johnny Rotten squats down and says, "You ever get the feeling you've been cheated?" Tosses his mic, walks off stage, and the Sex Pistols were no more. That is a line from Roger Ebert's script for the Sex Pistols movie.
Huh.
It's one of the most famous lines in fucking rock and roll, and Roger Ebert wrote it, and he never made a big deal out of it. It's just...
I did not know that. Of course I know about,
You heard it here first, or I heard it here first.
Yeah, ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
Yeah, that's Ebert wrote that. I don't know if it was a line for Rotten or somebody else, but and that never mystified me. I was never surprised to find out that the Sex Pistols love Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, because it's the exact same aesthetic. This is us. Come with us or don't. Fuck you. We don't care. End of story. And because there's nothing in Beyond the Valley of the Dolls that is trying to lure someone in who against their will. It's just you're in or you're out.
Yeah, and I think Julian Temple was the one who ended up being
he lashed
having
it all
to take
together.
on that burden of trying to make something useful, and that became the Great Rock and Roll Swindle. And of course, like a couple decades later, he made the very great documentary on the Sex Pistols, The Filth and the Fury. But God, Russ Meyer and Ebert, trying to get along with the Sex Pistols must have been something to see, because those are reasonably, my impression, and I could be wrong, is that those are reasonably straight shooting guys for guys in the industry, but then you got the Sex Pistols and they're Malcolm McLaren and that whole I can't see any of that.
I know,
it's like being in on the joke versus being the joke.
But yeah,
Step further.
I guess there is a kind of just a gonzo sincerity to the movie, but what do we make of the ending? And I don't mean of course we can talk about the murder spree, which closes it out, and Harris magically regaining his ability to walk,
Yes.
which is so hilarious. But
It's like cartoon logic, it's amnesia, but you get bonked on the head and then you get your memories back. He falls out of the car and he can walk again.
Yeah, I love stuff. It's why I love Body Double. It's got the same sort of ending where it's just like, you've triumphed over evil. Now everything's going to be okay for you personally.
Yes.
Like spiritually, like they needed a reason for it to happen.
Yeah.
Like, well, that's why it happened.
Yeah, no, that's true. And then, but
I mean, can we?
ends...
But here's a perfect example. I'm sorry. I mean, but the
No, please.
Is there anything? And again, even in the time, this was wildly inappropriate, and you couldn't believe what you were seeing when they're all scrambling to get to Z-Man's house to save their friends, and they're trying to get Harris into the car in his wheelchair, and he falls over. I mean, they're just making slapstick comedy out of a guy in a wheelchair falling over and crawling on the ground, and it's so awful and it's so wrong, but it's so fucking funny.
No, it is very funny because, like, when Casey makes her desperate call to Kelly, saying like, "Oh my God,
he's killing everybody,
he's killing everyone," and then Harris is like, "Let's go," and it has this whole like, "Let's go, teen gang," kind of like
Scooby-Doo action. Yeah, into the van, into the van, no less. Yes.
Yeah, and it's like seeing like the Scooby-Doo gang, like, scrambling to get on the road, and it's like, oh my God, like what are you people gonna do in this situation? There's like a lunatic who's just beheaded someone, like, on the loose, but this is a Hollywood movie, and so like everything's gonna work out at the end, right? And yes, it does work out with like a big triple wedding, and then
and the killing of Martin Bormann too. Martin Bormann finally pays for his terrible crimes.
Oh yeah, like God, we haven't even talked about. Oh my God, yeah. So it ends with this big triple wedding, and then also this like this stentorian homily from like an omniscient narrator. And I remember like I hadn't seen this entire movie before. I had caught the last third of it, I think, on TCM like many years ago. I didn't know anything about it, and I remember watching it unspool and like the narration, with the narrator like talking about like the journey these characters have been through and like their moral choices and stuff like that. And I was like, this movie's a satire or something, isn't it? And I wasn't able to put the pieces together like until I guess like last night when I finally watched the entire thing like all the way through. But it's really like a poke in the eye to like that, just like that tired Hollywood morality that you got that would soon be pretty much swept away by the new Hollywood in the 70s, where you were able to have stories about moral ambiguity and characters that were not quite good and not quite bad, these very complex stories.
And Easy Rider.
Yeah, like holy shit, like there's no way studio people would not, they'd be like, what the fuck is this? Like you can't end your fucking movie this way. But Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, it's like, hey, like we're really just gonna cram it down your throat. Like we're just gonna make it like as ridiculous as possible, because there is, and Josh, you can back me up on this, like the situation hasn't changed like 40 and 50 years later. Like there's still a feeling in mainstream filmmaking that it's like, well, we don't know if the audience is going to get it. Like we really have to like make it clear to them. Like there's no room for any kind of like nuance or kind of giving the audience clues and letting them put it together themselves. It's like, no, like you really have to spell it out for these dumb fucks.
Yeah, but I mean, and yet they're just having so much fun with that.
Right. That's exactly the point. It's like, hey, you want to shovel shit? Like we'll shovel twice as much as you wanted us to shovel. Yeah.
I mean, you if you ever see that in a movie theater, it's like the one thing you know for sure is the last 3 minutes of that film, people are howling with laughter. And deservedly so, and rightfully so, and intentionally so.
Yeah. But can we talk about the ending in a way that
well, we're giving it away. We'll give it away. That's fine.
Well, this movie just kind of, like, it's such a phantasmagoric, like, merry-go-round of, like, crazy happenings. You know, we alluded to the way that the editing, like, doesn't let you, like, take a breath, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, lest it lose your attention for a half a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, to the point where, yeah, the editing is really something in this. Like, it's really, like, and that's another way in which it, like, diverges from, like, studio product, is that, I mean, you just know that they were pissed about the way this was cut.
Yeah, you're showing scenes of things that haven't happened yet. What's
No, you
going
mean
on?
at the end? No, that's actually an old. That's I guarantee you that was not in the original script. That's an old screenwriter's trick for when you're concerned that the audience is going to get bored because they don't realize that the good shit's coming. So,
Oh yeah, yeah.
You
It's,
know-
it's like we'll show you some Nazi and some gunplay at the start. Just be like, don't worry, folks, it'll get in.
it really, because it's like
And-
the first,
What you're saying,
and especially if you're there, it's also Meyer going like, hey, to my troops, don't worry, we're gonna go full Meyer eventually. Just here, I'll give you a preview. Now watch these, Josie and the Pussycats move to L.A. and get corrupted for a while.
That's a really good point, like what you say, how you described it as like a screenwriter's trick. And,
Oh yeah,
with all the, like, Tim and I watch a lot of trash, and I often wonder why more, like, B filmmakers don't use that trick, because so many trash movies just start in, like, a really boring way. Like, they don't even know to, like, put, like, a really good kill up front, or, like, put some people fucking or something. It's like you get the blood moving, like, early on.
right.
And yeah, like, it is it certainly is like a device that's deployed here, but throughout, like, you just have this, like, crazy, like, avant-garde cutting that's going on, and to the point where you almost feel like a little bit like, I can't even describe how I felt watching it, just, like, breathless, because, like, there's these rapid cuts on the dialogue, and everything is, like, moving so fast, and you just get flashes. I mean, it's like it's very 1960s. Like, you got that, and it goes all the way back to Eisenstein and all that stuff, but it is this very 60s thing of, like, very rapid cuts, which kind of, like, prefigures like MTV and blah blah blah.
Yeah,
but...
it cuts to things that you don't know what they are. It's like, patient's general viewer, it'll all be made clear.
And Meyer was, I mean, my sense is, because he was definitely on the cutting edge of that. He was always making movies for himself, and he was bored. He was easily bored. Oh my God, all they're doing is sitting around talking. How do I get to the tits? It's like, I know, I'll make this scene go. I'll make this 5-minute scene go by in 43 seconds. How can I do that? Chop, 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 chop. And it's like, it's all there. But at the same time, he never lost his capacity for, showmanship, for entertainment. It's like, he knew that it has to translate to an audience. What's the quickest way I can do that? Cut all the bullshit out. And he was a fucking master of it. I mean, he really is. It's like, and there are people who study his editing. Yes, there should be. But he was an incredible editor.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to say, rule one is just don't waste our time.
Yeah.
Don't waste the audience's time.
Yeah. Get to the
and then
tits.
you couple that with
Yeah.
and
Like, there's
you
a bunch of
couple
people
that
talking here, but can we flash forward to a couple making out in a bathtub?
Yeah.
And you couple that with Ebert's dialogue, which is like, it's like groovy slam poetry.
But it's this mishmash of so many things. It's that Shakespearean stuff and that hippie talk and that amazing speech that the doctor gives about how Harris is going to be able to, maybe able to live, yes, a fulfilling life as a paraplegic, while the music swells.
Which is
It's
so
straight out of
funny.
some kind of 50s,
Yes. Yeah, it's like
He's
like,
just
Violent
throwing
lyrics
everything.
or some kind of Ed Wood cautionary
Yeah.
tale.
He's just throwing everything
it's
into the.
it's like the stuff that Douglas Sirk was kind of like poking
Yeah.
fun at, like the Doctor sequence.
Yeah, oh no, they're
Like,
very
that's
similar.
like-
There's a reason John Waters loves Douglas Sirk and Russ Meyer with the same intensity and passion, because they're definitely trading in the same. Yeah.
One thing that I think can trip up screenwriters, especially like less experienced ones, is being so in love with the written word that it makes particularly like the dialogue, like very samey, where it's like I just love creating dialogue, but you're like, well, all these characters talk in the exact same very clever way.
Yeah,
Oh, you're talking about Joss Whedon.
Yeah, we're getting into, like, I don't want to be too on brand here, and let me plug, I do a podcast called The West Wing Thing where we dissect every single episode of The West Wing for its terrible fucking politics. One of the things that we learned as we went, Dave and I started the show, like, yeah, well, we'll chop up the politics, but I mean, Sorkin's a great writer, and the more we got into it, it's like, oh my God, he's not a great fucking writer. And
Thank you.
Yeah, and people are always like, well, Shakespeare's characters always talk the same. We're like, no, they always talk in iambic pentameter, but they have different voices. Sorkin's all just talk smug, and fucking Ebert. Yeah, think about like the different. Imagine like Z-Man having a conversation with Randy, the fucking Muhammad Ali character. Those are two incredibly distinct characters. With their own voices. I mean, hilariously so. Z-Man does Shakespeare. As someone says, Ed Z-Man sounds like Shakespeare. And Randy, like, everything is in boxing metaphors. Everybody has everything Harris says is just sort of downtrodden and pathetic. Everybody has their own voice in this thing.
Yes.
That's amazing writing. Yeah,
their own point of view, which informs the way they speak.
Yeah.
That is exactly right. And that is, I think that's really rare and like really the sign of a great writer where the characters have legitimately distinct voices.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of writers who get lauded as being very clever, all their characters kind of speak as like extensions of the writer.
Yeah, as you say, Joss Whedon and Aaron Sorkin being the top of that list. I will always defend Mamet because even though you can always tell a Mamet character within a line or two, they still within that have their own distinct perspective and voice.
Mm-hmm. No, that's
it's
true.
Kind of it's the difference of being like a great actor versus being like a movie star. It's like you go for this certain style versus going for people who sort of disappear into their characters.
Yeah,
whether it's a writer or an actor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing with Mamet is even like with minor Mamet, like for example, like speaking of Phil Spector, I recently revisited the movie that Mamet made about Phil Spector, which it's not.
Watch A Spanish Prisoner instead.
I was gonna say it's
watch
not
Spartan. Goddammit, I will go to my grave defending that fucking movie.
Ooh, that might be.
I don't think I've seen that one. Yeah.
What?
I'd have to visit.
Mamet doesn't act in film.
But the thing about the Phil Spector movie is that even though it's like not like it's not an immortal movie like it's not like Glengarry Glen Ross, but it still has that like snappy crackling dialogue that you get with Mamet. So it's like you still see glimpses of it, but but going back to Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, like I'm really hard pressed to think of many movies that effectively give you different character voices.
Yep.
Like, I mean, you really, and Josh, you really pinpointed it where it's like, Z-Man like speaks completely differently from, Randy or Lance or, any
or any normal person.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I don't know, do we want to talk about Martin Bormann?
Or the ending?
Yeah.
Actually, somebody, if you've gotten this far and you haven't seen the film, fuck you. You deserve what you get. But the revelation at the end, I heard someone recently describe the film as transphobic and drove me crazy because Z-Man, I will go to my grave. I'll fight for this one. Z-Man is not a trans character. Z-Man is a woman.
There are, I don't know.
And that's fine to have a problem with women. I mean,
and let's be clear, he's a flat-chested woman. So come on, fuck that bitch. I mean, it's in a Russ Meyer movie. Of course, she's a bad girl, bad guy, whatever.
Oh my God, it all makes sense now.
Yeah, the smallest boobs in the film belong to Z-Man.
No wonder she was so angry.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
I feel like
like in the Russ Meyer universe, your only option, surrounded by all that Brompton nastiness, is that a word? is to pass yourself off as Phil Spector.
And I'll say this, and
nobody listens to this, right? I'm not going to.
like, and we, like, maybe, perhaps some of our trans listeners can correct me if I'm wrong, but there are movies which get labeled as queerphobic or transphobic, but they're so far removed from the actual experience of trans or queer people that they almost get a pass from from me. And I, maybe I'm full of shit, and I'm not gonna say that it isn't like problematic to have like a some kind of like insane trans villain like murder everybody at the end of your movie. Like, yeah, it's not progressive, but Z-Man might as well be from another planet. Like,
yeah, like, you think that the trans thing is Z-Man's problem?
And by the way, you want to put it in that perspective? Yeah, it's 1969. Imagine how fucking difficult it would be having to live in that world. It's like the world makes you crazy. It's I don't know. I can defend Z-Man on every level if you want.
Well, and the other thing too is that and this was not to go back to Celluloid Closet, but maybe a better parallel would be something which Tim and I have talked about on the show before. I'm pretty sure we talked about, like, one thing that we always laughed about was, being nerds ourselves and interested in genre stuff, like science fiction or whatever. The real generational divide between science fiction fans is, with older sci-fi fans, it's like you talk to them and they'll be like, it was a really great show, Space 1999 or something like that. And you're like, no, that show wasn't good. It was just practically the only science fiction that was on TV. You had to like it. Yeah. Now we have choices. We don't just have to take whatever shit is shoveled down our throats. And it's kind of the same thing with queer representation in movies where opinions are much divided on this. And, that's totally fair. But it's like, some people are like, hey, Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs is is trans representation. And I love Buffalo Bill. And then other trans people are like, I was physically sick when I saw Silence of the Lambs because, it was just such an ugly representation of something that, I am. And, years hence, it's like we don't have to settle for, like, that, just representation in movies because it's like, they're actual, like, queer characters that are, fully realized and not just like, oh, well, like the villain in this is nominally trans, so we're gonna latch onto that as representation. But I don't know if, like, again, like, Z-Man to me might as well be an extraterrestrial.
Yeah, like, I'm a big fan of. Look, I get it. I'm an old white guy, and what the fuck do I know? And everything about the culture I grew up in deserves to be burned to the ground. I'm not being funny, but context really is everything. I mean, I'm that's going to be inscribed on my gravestone. And you have to look at it in terms of the context of the time because every great radical progressive message of its day looks fucking dated and stained and noxious today. You know what I mean? And, I've had these conversations with people and, one of the, because there's not a lot of trans representation in films at all up till, a decade or two ago, beyond one or two unfortunate examples. But, the one I always go to is like, the black best friend who always had to die in a certain kind of film for a long time. And for me, I don't know where the line is. I don't know where the cutoff is. But for the first few years of that was actually a way of, like, actually getting black characters into films and portraying them as something other than just sort of the help. And it was like, okay, the price you pay is you got to kill him. Jim Brown's going to have to die saving, Rod Taylor's life in Dark of the Sun, but that's, 1967 or something. By 1985, it's really fucking noxious. But there is a period of time there where it's people in Hollywood trying to do everything they can to get that into a film, to get something vaguely progressive and challenging into a movie, and that's the price you've got to pay.
It's incremental. Yeah,
it is incremental. The one that always gets me is what Kimberly Pierce, the one who directed Boys Don't Cry.
Boys Don't Cry.
Did you hear it like a year or two ago? Well, it has to be more than a year because we've been in quarantine. Was at a screening of the film, and she got booed by a bunch of trans students because she had cast a cisgender actress as Brandon Tina. yeah, if she did that today, that movie actually opened the door for movies dealing with these issues so that we're actually able to have these conversations today. And it's like judging a movie from the early 90s by the standards of 2020. It's just, you'll go insane doing that.
I'll say this, because there's,
you'll start booing your allies in theaters.
Yeah, it's that's really tough, and I don't know if it's quite fair. And the other thing is that rightly so, I think that people are saying why aren't we casting trans actors in trans parts? But this is something I said to Tim the other week. I was like, wait a minute, why aren't we casting trans actors in cis roles? The only one I can think of off the top of my head is there's a trans actress playing a cis woman in Gaspar Noé's Climax.
Right. Well, yeah, and I mean, she probably struck me as someone who was part of that scene. So in that way, it kind of fits. And that's more a question of, why aren't you just casting a person who's appropriate for the role that they represent? It was done similarly about action movies a while ago, where it's why are we casting all these charmless meatheads in action movie leads? And it's because they got the look for it. It's you don't trust that an actor can maybe hit the gym for a couple of weeks and then look the part. Trust in someone's ability to present themselves, as a different sort of character rather than just being, reductive about their, demographic.
Especially
we need a trans person to play a trans person.
Especially in these days of human growth hormone. But one thing that I will say, going back to Josh's point. Oh no, I'm sorry, but going back to your point about kind of the people who are trying to just crack the door. Obviously, it's these things were unfortunate, but the thing is that there were these radical viewpoints at the time. It's just that it was so difficult to get mainstream places the Hollywood studio system to even indulge it. Yeah. So, and I can't speak to Kimberly Pierce's politics, and I don't know if she would have been amenable to it or not, but I have to imagine that if she was oh, let's can we cast a trans man in this role, they would have laughed her out of the conference room.
She would never have gotten that film made at that time.
Yeah,
it simply would not have happened. And because that film got made, more movies about that and was a success. More movies about that subject got greenlit and eventually led to the point where, you could have these arguments. And it's always the thing. I got a long time ago, just a long story, but I got to talk to a lot of sort of older black actors who had done a bunch of blaxploitation films and caught tons of shit for it. And, they were like, this is the only opportunity we had to look at a camera and talk about our lives. And that opened the door for all kinds of things, And it's just, I think it's deadly to judge anything and anyone from a previous time by today's standards. I think it's just...
Well, I got a hot take for you then. Similarly, my thoughts on John Wayne as Genghis Khan. I mean, that's laughable by today's standards, but it's
terrible movie too.
Right, yeah,
genuinely terrible.
More
movie.
to the point, yeah. But it's why don't we cast an Asian? Why don't we cast a Mongolian actor for that? It's you never would have seen that movie then. That movie would not have been made. Simply just logistically.
Terrible argument, because that movie should never have been made.
Well, let's look at it this way, because imagine if they had cast an Asian actor in that role. That poor guy would have just died of cancer in 20 years.
That's right. Yeah. Why do you want to kill Asian people?
Yeah. So John Wayne taking the L on that one. That's fine with me. But
staying at home and acting in movies rather than going to World War II.
But
no, there was go ahead.
But to go off Josh's point about the blaxploitation movies, that's why these genres and films which are seen as trashy by the mainstream are really pretty important, because much like Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, it's you have a B picture borderline pornographic director coming in with studio money and resources to make this extraordinary statement, which is so rare and so delightful to see. It's kind of the same thing with it's not there weren't awful like blaxploitation pictures. I mean, yeah, you got your occasional guy from Harlem, but yeah, it's like, you have black filmmakers and black actors like making movies about their own milieu, and then you would have, obviously people would object to this and saying like, oh, this is such a negative portrayal of like black people and blah blah. But it's like, I mean, it's the same thing with like Friedkin's Cruising. It's like, gay rights activists were so upset about this movie, and it's like, I'm sorry, there are some gay guys who like to fucking get fisted in basements.
Yeah, it's like,
and
do you want
these
to see
people,
things that are...
these people deserve like, consideration as people with dignity. I'm sorry, yeah, they're freaky, but freaks are important. I want to hear from the freaks.
Yeah. Do you want to like marginalize and sweep that under the rug then? Do you want to like present a false narrative about what this community is? You're just marginalizing another group of people, a subcommunity within your own subcommunity.
And that is, I mean, perfect example. That is Billy Friedkin trying to do something. You can argue about whether or not he succeeded. You can argue about whether or not he failed so spectacularly that it ended up achieving the opposite goal. But his intention was fucking sincere with that movie.
Cruising rules. I love it.
Yeah, and like once it's out there too, it's kind of out of your hands how people are going to react to it. You can just, do your best with whatever message you're trying to say.
Yeah, and so... Sorry,
which by the way, I should have, if you haven't, just if you know the film Cruising, just Google Dave Thomas Cruising Gourmet for one of SCTV's greatest skits of all time. He does stuff to a chicken. Never mind.
Crisco wristwatch. Yeah, well, I don't know if we've gotten off the point. I think it's relevant to the point, but
Oh, I've gotten off, all right.
I just think the idea of trying to cram a Russ Meyer movie into a sort of 2021 sense of, I mean, because he's so far ahead of the curve, he's so radical, he's so unabashedly what he is. The trying to judge him by any standards other than his own is just insane. It's like and even if I can't imagine. I've never shown this movie to anybody who just didn't have their world just expanded massively by seeing it. But even if you're someone who looks at this film and goes, God damn it, this is everything that's wrong with the world. Stuff like Russ Meyer getting to make this movie, this all contributes to more outsiders being able to come in and present their visions to the world. And there is a straight line from Russ Meyer getting to be on the Valley of the Dolls to Shaka King getting to make a movie about Fred Hampton. And I can draw it. It would take 2.5 hours. But it's really fucking important to even if you dismiss the specifics, even if you go, this movie's fucked up, this guy's a sexist pig and blah, blah, whatever you want to say, you have to own the fact that him getting in the door and getting to make this movie and this movie finding an audience helped crack a system, helped open it up to more interesting and diverse filmmakers, some of whom you actually like.
Well, and the thing too, like if we're gonna go by like kind of like brain dead like liberal media criticism standards, like you can't say that Russ Meyer just makes kind of like boilerplate like misogynistic pornography. It's like these are like really active female characters like doing their own thing, like fucking men over, like sometimes they're beating them up and killing them. It's like
tell me what's wrong with Tura Satana being a movie star. Tell me what's wrong with that. No one can. You can't make that case.
We just talked about Astra Zombies and spent a lot of time on Tura just because she's so, I mean, like,
she is a presence.
Yeah, like once you've laid eyes on her, you will never forget her.
She's amazing. And imagine, some Hollywood director giving her a fucking break. It's just not happening. Russ Meyer sees her and goes, that's my Brando.
Yeah, seeing her doing burlesque, being like, this woman has my attention. This is what I want.
She can rotate each titty separately. It's amazing. But yeah, so no, I think Josh, like, you really hit on it, like why like filmmakers like Meyer are so important, and I really have to agree with like people like John Waters who are always like gonna go to bat for the people who are a little out of step. And, you know, I think this movie, like, and this is 100% one of his favorite movies. You know, like, because if you look at what this movie came out of, like Hollywood at the tail end of the 60s, the Hollywood that gave us the original Valley of the Dolls, which is like I said, has some camp value, but there's something so moribund about it, like compared to Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. Like, sure. You know, Valley of the Dolls is just like a pretty straightforward presentation of like a trashy book, and Beyond the Valley of the Dolls really like is like, okay, you want trash? Well, let's just wallow in it, baby.
Yeah, that's the same thing as like Michael Haneke movies. It's like, oh, you want to see bad things happen to these characters? Well, fucking choke on it.
Yes. Yeah, or like the climax of Unforgiven, where it's like, you know, Clint Eastwood is like, oh yeah, you want to see me kick some fucking ass? Well, I'm gonna give it to you, and you're just like, oh god, I don't want this. This is horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there anything else that we want to say about Beyond the Valley of the Dolls? It's kind of something that you have to experience for yourself. I don't know if we've even scratched the surface.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, and I'm not kidding either. It's a, you know, every time I see it, it's one of those films, and this to me is the mark of a great film. I find something new in it. Every time I show it to somebody new, they love it. It's an incredible piece of work, and you know, it's organic. It's organic to its director. It's organic to its writer. It flows from them. It's honest. It's real, and it's also insane. I mean, the great thing about it is that it's all those things, and yet it can completely appeal to a 2021 sort of, you know, irony-drenched, you know, millennial crowd, I would hope. It's just a fucking masterpiece, and it will never get its due. Even if, like, next year they give it an honorary Oscar, that's not enough.
Well, I think there is a Criterion edition, if I'm not mistaken.
There is, and I hate to say this because I would love to, but there's also if you have an all regions player, the Arrow video, the Arrow Blu-ray is slightly better.
And you know, if you don't have,
and I have both.
If you don't have an all region DVD
player, and VHS.
Nice. A real fan. And, you know, honestly, if you're listening to the show and you don't have an all-region DVD player, what are you even doing? Like, what the hell? But, you know, there's also other ways of getting movies.
But here's the thing. They both have great supplements, and they're different. Like, you should just get them both. I mean, you can't go wrong with it.
Yeah, because speaking of John Waters,
covers your bases, yeah.
You can actually see John Waters effusing about the movie, like I think on the Criterion website. They went ahead and put up some of those.
Yeah, and the Arrow one has a DVD of the 7 minutes, which you need to see once.
Oh my god! Like that's like that's what kills me. It was like when many years ago when Tim and I first started hanging out. Like he invited me over to watch the riff tracks of Troll 2, and he had a high definition copy of Troll 2 that, you know, I forget what channel he'd gotten it off of, but I remember. Yeah, I remember saying to Tim, I was like, oh my god, like someone took the time to telecine this in high def. That's amazing.
It was an intern who wanted to learn how to do it, I'm sure.
Right.
Just like your new Troll 2, fine.
You know, that's the best Troll 2 is gonna look. I gotta say, but I will say, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls is an absolute feast for the eyes. Oh god, it's so good looking. Yeah,
it's so good looking. And so, if you're just, you guys have a pretty cool crowd. If you're someone, and I will fight to the death for the second one. If you're a fan of the Austin Powers movies, and you think they sprung full blown from Mike Myers' head, and he doesn't pretend they do. I'm not knocking him. You got to see this film. You've got to see this film.
No, that's absolutely true. And I did see all three of those in the theater.
And Josh, The President's Analyst. Have you guys done The President's Analyst yet?
I haven't seen that. I've seen What's New Pussycat, which...
Nah. Okay, I'm, if you'll have me, I'll come back. We'll do President's Analyst. It's an amazing film.
I'd be into that. You know, Josh, we'll let you go.
Can't do us any harm. Can't do our career any harm.
Yeah,
Oh, my friend, you don't understand. My entire podcast career is one long endeavor to destroy my day job. That's all.
That's awesome.
Well, we're happy to help. Yeah.
Like real talk. I can't speak for Tim, to be honest, but I do feel like my current endeavors are really, and everything I do on Twitter is really me just being like, let's see how unemployable I can make myself, because I don't want a real job. I want to be an artist.
Hey, the same Russ Meyer at Notion. You just go big or go home.
That's
exactly right. Go big or go home.
Go home.
Beautiful.
Josh, really quick. I don't want to keep you too late, but I did want to ask you about like a little bit of trivia that I found, because you were a friend of the man. Did you know that Harlan Ellison worked on the script to the original Valley of the Dolls?
No, I didn't. We never discussed it.
Yeah, there was apparently
that makes sense because he did the Oscar.
Yeah, just be moribund 60s films, but
which, by the way, available on Blu-ray with an amazing commentary track from I'm trying to remember. Oh, me and Patton Oswalt. Well worth your time, and it's a great film.
I believe it.
It's not a great film, but the commentary track is.
It's like Riff Tracks. Riff Tracks has elevated a lot of, and Mystery Science Theater have elevated a lot of movies beyond their station.
Oh, we're gonna have to. You kids in your Mystery Science Theater.
The show's been on for 30 years. Come on.
Yeah.
All right.
We had Jonah Ray on the movie show, and Joe Dante spent 45 minutes just beating him up, and Jonah was absolutely lovely and ended up winning Joe over. But a TV show where a bunch of people write scripted jokes at movies they think are beneath them, it just drives me fucking nuts. It's just...
Ooh, no, I will argue. I came at a guy on Twitter for expressing that same opinion, because the thing is about the...
He was right. No,
the thing about the MST crew is that these are people who absolutely love movies. They wouldn't be doing what they did if they didn't love. And like the guy who created Mystery Science Theater, Joel Hodgson,
I know
he loves all those old movies. He loves all those.
I've had this argument with those gentlemen, but for me, Joe just hates the whole idea. Joe Dante, my co-host of the Movies That Made Me. For me, it's like the fact that it's scripted is what does it for me. There's nothing funnier than sitting in a movie theater for a movie that turns out to be an absolute turkey, and an audience is having its way with the film, and people are coming up with stuff spontaneously that's absolutely hilarious. But the fact there's a writer's room on those shows makes me insane.
Ooh, man, this is like the 60s generation gap, man. It's just like, it's all...
You kids just don't understand.
No, but... Oh yeah, like
someday you'll drink
the fact that you've been sitting there with a joint in your hand for 2 hours, and I'm sitting here with tequila. It's like, that's everything. That's it. That's all you need.
No, but well, maybe one of these days we'll introduce you to our very good friend Bill Corbett, who we have had on the show and who wrote for Mystery Science Theater and was the second Crow T robot. But and then you guys can fight while we egg you on.
Yeah.
But no, like that tidbit about Harlan Ellison, like apparently he had wanted I guess like the original novel had a really downbeat ending, which he wanted to keep, and of course the studio wanted like the mega happy ending, and I guess Ellison was so ticked off about it that he was like, take my name off this fucking movie, and so, thus he's not credited.
Well, that would be Harlan. Yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine Harlan adapting Jekyll and Suzanne. Crazy. I mean, we only hung out for like 13 years, but that never came up.
I don't know. Like, I wouldn't blame him if he was like, I don't even want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, no, I was curious about that. But Josh, thank you so much for your time. This was really fun.
No, it's a pleasure. I love talking endlessly about movies. That you guys are great. It's a lot of fun.
No, we really.
But yeah, let's do President's Analyst. You guys need to see that.